This is The Insight, a focused podcast about creative people and the ideas they're working on right now. Most conversations about innovation and creativity on podcasts happen long after the fact, or in a format that can last 60 or 90 minutes long. The Insight is different. Each episode runs for about 20 minutes and is built on a single moment, the insight. Within that time period, our guest explains the idea, project, or question that's driving their work. Not their greatest hits or a press release, but the thing they're generally thinking through and working on now. My audience is made up of people who want to hear more about where these leaders are headed. I'm your host, Mark Granella. I'm a historian by training, an author, and a longtime editor of business and educational work, and someone who's deeply curious about how new ideas actually take shape. The people you'll hear from on this podcast are pioneers and innovators, not because of their titles, but because of the problems they're trying to solve and the needs they're trying to meet. This is The Insight, focused, thoughtful conversations about what some amazing people are doing today. Today, we're going to talk to Dr. Daven Morrison. Dr. Morrison writes, teaches, and conducts research with the intent of gaining an understanding of the impact of work on mental health. He has a multifaceted professional life, much of which is spent as principal of Morrison Associates, where he works as an organizational psychiatrist, advising both private industry and municipal government. In addition, Daven teaches medical and MBA students as well as practicing municipal leaders. He has co-written 2 textbooks as well as many articles for academic journals and popular magazines. Daven, it's a pleasure to speak to you today. Again, welcome to The Insight. So Daven, what are you working on now?
Well, Mark, what I'm particularly interested in is this particular moment in time, specifically the intersection of the workplace with the arrival of artificial intelligence and
Right?
what's right around the corner, agentic general artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little more about your company, Morrison and Associates?
We're a relatively small boutique advisory service based out of medicine. Funny thing is, we come out of psychiatry, and in the period of time that we developed HIPAA was brought forth kind of in the medical world, and we were HIPAA long before HIPAA even was a concept. But
Right?
the idea was important that if the leaders are healthy, mentally sound, they're going to be making better decisions, have better judgment, and take better care of not only their business, but also the environment their business works in and the families and people that work for it or are impacted by their business.
Mm.
So there's kind of a selfish, trickle-down, future-oriented perspective of Morrison that we want leaders to be healthy and compassionate and humane to each other. So one of the ways that can happen is when you have tough conversations that take courage and are reality-based
Mm.
about what are we doing, why are we doing it, what's the impact of what we're doing. So that's 2 of our core values, being reality-based and having courage to talk about tough things.
What are the sort of problems that you've encountered with this new influence in the workplace?
As we look at it from a couple of different perspectives, there's particular interest of mine in terms of as it enters the workplace, how do leaders lead organizations that are basically a chimera? I know you probably know that word.
Yeah. Sort of a weird mixed animal, right? Yeah, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a griffin or a sphinx,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mermaid. What is this chimera of human beings and artificial intelligence, and how does it go to work, and how does it work with other organizations that are made up of people and AI? So it's a fascinating problem. It gets complicated quickly.
Right. So what problems have you found, for instance? What's a interesting example?
The things that are interesting to me currently are the early problems generated by AI when people use them as therapists.
Mm.
So, as a psychiatrist, I'm particularly interested in the challenge of the original structure of what the current AI. These are not agentic AIs. They don't have drives. They don't have a capacity to recall for the most part. The last
Mm-hmm.
conversation they had, They're just tapping back into a word predicting algorithm, right?
Right.
What's the next word? And by doing so, they can be particularly compelling because they can tap into processes and logic that are well known and useful with people.
Right.
But there's a legacy problem in the prompts, the people that built these, that made them particularly sycophantic. In a mental health world, the problems are significant in terms of whether or not they will tell people to turn away from a dangerous behavior, whether or not they will turn people back towards their human relationships. It can
Mm.
be particularly seductive to have somebody there 24/7 who always says the right thing and always has you as the center of the world.
Right.
And that was designed by purpose. That was designed and done by purpose by the original LLM designers
Hmm.
to make people want to keep using it and not turn it off. The other side of things that I'm looking at, Mark, is to try to educate the workforce on how important it is for people to have a job, not universal basic income, but to have a job. And that if
Right.
there really is truly a job apocalypse, that's a huge mental health problem on the society. So universal basic income isn't going to solve the problem of this gives me an identity, this gives my life meaning, this gives my day structure, this gives me
Mm.
credibility in my family and my local community.
Right.
UBI, universal basic income, will not supply those things.
Right. Right. That makes sense.
So we were talking as part of our little cohort of people looking at this. I've got a colleague who is an entrepreneur and recently sold a AI-based company in the healthcare world, an emergency room doc who's working inside a healthcare company here in Chicago who's
Hmm.
looking for applications of AI, a
Right.
professor of journalism, a professor of business administration. You've met him, Harry Kramer,
Mm.
and then a handful of clients. And we have now a regular cadence of meeting and saying, what are we seeing and what are the implications?
So you've got a little think tank there in
Yes.
Chicago. So tell me about
Yeah.
the think tank and how you guys plan to work.
One of the fellows is a professor of leadership, values-based leadership at Kellogg, and we've been
Hmm.
friends for a long time. And I contributed a small section to his most recent book, and I was delighted to celebrate his book with another fellow, Paul Brody,
Hmm.
who is considered one of the world's expert on Ethereum and blockchain. So he presented his book, and Harry presented their book, and I thought we need more time to talk. It was kind of a large conference room.
Hmm.
And I thought, wouldn't it be better if we could sit down across this table in a room with people that were motivated to have a conversation, let them talk about their books, and let us talk about our response to it.
Right. Right.
And after that, we realized, hey, we've got something interesting here. People like to be together. And so we dedicated the next conversation to be about artificial intelligence.
I do want to ask though, inside the walls of a company, like you were talking about, how
Yeah,
leaders manage,
yeah,
this AI people interface or
yeah,
combination.
yeah.
So what do you see the problem there, and what are some solutions you're sort of experimenting with?
Well, the two problems I see are the seduction and the humbling side of it. The seduction that it knows everything and tells me I'm wonderful,
Hmm.
right?
Right, right.
The sycophantic glazing side. By the way, most people know the narcissism story, but what they forget is there was another character in Narcissus, and that was Echo. And Echo was a sweet little wood nymph that just followed Narcissus around and told him how wonderful he was.
Hmm.
So it's very symbiotic. And but the problem is, right, what happens when one side goes away? Well, the other is incomplete and at lost. So I think that's going to be a problem psychologically for people in general with AI. And then at the workplace, what the group came to a conclusion was essentially, we've been through this before. The economy is pretty resilient. We know how to create jobs. It's up and down, but it's basically about 4% unemployment. It's never been much more or less than that. And we need to be thinking about embracing it and adopting it. So we kind of turned it more into a technological change management problem
Hmm.
rather than a end of humanity dystopia, which some people have talked about.
Right, right, right. Well, I mean, it depends on how you use it, right? You could use
Yeah.
any technology in a good or bad way. I think the one thing I would agree with you or the alarmist is not AI in itself, but just the sort of super rapid way it's been adopted. And its potential means that it'd be better to be much more thoughtful about the way we do that. What was the moment when you thought, okay, this is a project I'm going to get involved in on dealing with the AI in the workplace?
Well, you know Karen Noob,
Hmm.
and she had been working on a concept called artificial empathy and was kind of a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of how are these kind of new technologies going to be used. There's the fictional movie called Her,
Hmm.
where a person is seduced by this,
Oh,
you
right. That
know,
was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was Siri,
yeah.
right?
So this artificial empathy thing was intriguing to me. And then, as my colleague Matt Pipke talks about, you've met Matt, as he talks about, it came out of nowhere relatively, this LLMs and the power of it. It was like, holy cow, they not only get the gist, they get more than the gist. I mean,
Mm,
write me a policy for a 1,100 person employee policy or handbook for 1,100 person financial services firm. Boom, it does it in seconds or a
right,
couple minutes.
right.
That power was so the inspiration was what would be left for humans to do, if
Right.
anything.
Right.
So I played with that idea and came up with the concept in therapy of countertransference. And when two people come to therapy, the patient brings their story and they transfer it back onto the therapist.
Hmm.
And that's part of the work of therapy, and you've got to be ready to deal with that and interpret it and put it to work for the therapy. In addition, the therapist is a human being. And so they bring what's called countertransference.
Right.
So I really like this patient, they're really sexy, or I can't stand this patient, they drive me nuts, or
Right. Right.
this patient is gross, or this patient is beautiful. All those kind of things are countertransference. And I thought, for now at least, you have to have lived a life. You have to have scratched your knee. You have to have fallen in love. You have to have tasted spicy food and burnt your tongue and
Mm,
had an orgasm and all those things to become an adult. And by doing that uniquely to your own story, you can have countertransference. You can't
mm,
artificially generate countertransference because it's messy, it's imperfect,
right.
it's limited to one life.
Mm.
So that was sort of the inspiration. And then as I watched these other things come along and how excited everybody was or overwhelmed or anxious about the arrival of AI, I thought I got to try to get out in front of this.
What is it about your background that made you sensitive to this problem or approach it in the way you did? How do you
Well,
do this uniquely?
yeah, I think part of my experience, of my education, and my work that comes over the transom every day provides that kind of uniqueness. And that what people on the outside would say is, "Hey, you're an executive coach, right?" And I say, "Yeah, I think that's what my clients call me." But there aren't many executive advisors. I see myself as more an advisor than a coach who are physicians and psychiatrists in particular. I think the other thing is many that come from the behavioral sciences that come out of therapy or that are clinical,
Right.
they advocate for the person, and that's important. But in the dynamic of somebody at work, you also have to advocate for the work itself. And what can happen sometimes, particularly when we were talking about countertransference before,
Hmm.
when a patient or an executive is able to provoke a certain amount of pity or sympathy for how their boss or their workplace treats them. I think the psychiatrist or the therapist could underestimate the growth opportunity and or the actual reality testing of the patient. I have a project right now, you and I've talked about it related to grief. And it's really important to appreciate that grief, people that are grieving are kind of broken. They're not 100%.
Mm,
And they follow their own course. It's not like, okay, you're done grieving now because you've had 7 days of bereavement leave or whatever. It can come back throughout life.
mm,
Certainly within the first year as you hit major anniversaries and memories.
right.
But you're kind of broken. However, the workplace didn't hire a broken person. They hired you when you were healthy.
Right.
So how does the organization kind of rally around respecting the grieving person while also
Mm,
recognizing that other people are going to have to pick up their work? either have to do their job or part of their job. I think that's the uniqueness that I bring is kind of an appreciation for the human being that has their good and bad days,
Hmm.
as well as the workplace doesn't, as they
Doesn't
say, like,
stop.
yeah, like the honey badger. He doesn't care.
So if we were to try to whittle down the insight that you have about AI to the most compact statement possible, what's the clearest idea you'd want a listener to walk away with
Hmm.
concerning your work with AI and the workplace?
I think the most important thing right now is what many people are asking me. I'm having is helping organizations, leaders helping their people tell what's really going on. I can't tell you how many people have recently come up to me and say, Daven or Dr. Morrison, I'm just having a hard time telling what's real, right? And I think AIs are going to make that worse, at least for a
Mm,
while,
mm.
until we get some kind of perhaps underwriter's laboratory.
Right. What are your next steps in this AI and work journey, and either the challenges or opportunities you anticipate?
Well, I've got a couple of uh, leadership development, leadership advising clients right now who are navigating what technology to pick, who to put on the team, how to talk about it with clients. It's just awesome. It's
Mm,
fun to be part of it right now. It's kind of like I don't know what the equivalent would be, but kind of the discovery of antibiotics or X-rays or something. It's just really going to change things.
mm.
So sitting side by side and watching them make their decisions, one of my clients, the leader of the group, said in our seminar that he's using a rule that comes from BCG, back to
Oh,
your
back to
world,
Boston. Okay, yeah. Of
which
course.
is which is the problem is 10, 20, 70, 10% technology, 20% sort of adapting and customizing the technology for the company, and 70% change management.
Mm,
So I'm not sure he's right, but I like that is in a way to think about the work that's going to be required to bring it in. Mark, I want to share one other thing though that kind of ties back into question four a little bit,
sure.
and that is we know human beings navigate the world with their brains, right? For the
Right,
most
right.
part.
For the most part.
And the brains are pattern matching machines. They're looking for patterns. This is a door. This is a refrigerator. This is a car. This is a train track. And so we're navigating the world. This is a nice person. This is a dangerous person. All of that. Part of the challenge of COVID is similar to the challenge of AI, which is the world has never seen this before. At least most living people had never seen COVID, a,
Mm,
a pandemic that required, isolation, that had no vaccine and was lethal. It was so what we tried to do when we were dealing with this at a local bank was, well, let's think about the things that we've seen that are like it. And I think that's what's compelling and fun about this AI is we've never seen anything before that's going to be more intelligent than us,
mm,
sort of working side by side us. We've never seen anything as comprehensive in terms of its ability. So one fellow in the group said it's kind of like the arrival of the splitting of the atom in terms of I can't really get my mind around it. Like
right.
you can split the atom, you can make a bomb, or you can make a
Uh-huh.
nuclear power plant. You
Right,
know, so
right.
so so that's been fun for me.
This is great talking to you about this, and I hope that your work with this group and with AI helps to humanize
Hmm.
our way forward with this very impressive technology. David, thank you so much
Hey, this is
for your
fun.
time.